Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're going to embark on a journey back in time to a quiet corner of the English countryside during one of history's most challenging periods. In a world filled with the echoes of war, where headlines screamed of distant battles and daily life was marked by rationing and blackouts. Not did ordinary people find moments of peace, love, and unwavering hope. Tonight, we'll discover just that through the gentle tale of a family in Willow Creek, whose quiet courage and enduring spirit kept a light burning brightly, even in the darkest of times. So, find your most comfortable spot, dim the light, and let your mind drift as we begin. The quiet light of Willow Creek. The scent of damp earth and wood smoke always heralded autumn in Willow Creek. A tiny hamlet nestled deep within the English countryside. Even in the crisp air of 1941, as the world outside roared with conflict, a certain stillness clung to Willow Creek like a whispered secret. Agnes, with hands dusted lightly with flour and hair perpetually escaping its pins, found solace in the rhythm of her days. Each morning, she rose before dawn, the familiar chill of the cottage floor, a gentle prod. She would light the stove, the crackle and pop of kindling a tiny symphony in the quiet house, and begin the bread for the day. Her husband, Walter, had been gone for what felt like a lifetime, though it had only been a year. He was a quiet man, a carpenter by trade, with hands that could coax beauty from the gnarliest of oaks, and a laugh that rumbled deep in his chest. Now, his laughter was a memory, a warmth she clutched close in the long, often solitary nights. He was serving somewhere, far away in the Royal Engineers, building bridges and repairing roads, his letters infrequent but precious, each one meticulously unfolded and refolded, was scented faintly with something that wasn't quite mud and wasn't quite wood, but uniquely him. Their daughter, Elsie, was 7, a wisp of a child with eyes the color of summer skies and a boundless imagination that often transported her far beyond the cottage walls. For Elsie, the war was a distant echo, something spoken of in hushed tones by the grown-ups. Her world was filled with the rustle of leaves in the ancient willow by the creek. The secret world beneath the rhubarb leaves in the garden, and the comforting presence of her mother. Agnes's days were a gentle tapestry of chores and quiet moments. She tended her small garden, coaxing potatoes and carrots from the stubborn soil. She knitted socks for Walter, her needles clicking a soft lullaby in the evenings. She patched clothes, mended broken toys, and stretched their meager rations into nourishing meals. Each task was a small act of defiance against the chaos of the world, a quiet declaration that life, beautiful and tenacious, would continue. In the afternoons, when Elsie was at the village school. Agnes would often sit by the window, a cup of weak tea steaming in her hands. She would watch the shadows lengthen across the fields, listen to the distant bleating of sheep, and allow her mind to drift. She thought of Walter, of his strong hands, of the way he would hum off-key as he worked. She imagined him somewhere safe, perhaps looking at a sky filled with the same stars that twinkled over Willow Creek. It was thin, the paper crinkled, and Walter's familiar, slightly sprawling handwriting filled the front. Agnes's heart did a small flutter. A bird caught in her ribs. She carefully slit the envelope open, her fingers trembling slightly. Dearest Agnes, the air here is cold, but the sun, when it appears, is surprisingly bright. I think of you and Elsie often, of the warmth of our cottage, the smell of your baking bread. Do the daffodils still bloom by the old stone wall in spring? I hope so. They always brought a smile to my face. Work is hard, but we are all in this together. There's a quiet camaraderie amongst the men here, a shared understanding that binds us. We talk of home, of the things we miss. I miss the sound of Elsie's laughter the most, and your quiet presence beside me. Hold on to hope, my love. It is the strongest weapon we have. I carry you both in my heart, always. Tell Elsie I think of her adventures amongst the rhubarb. All my love. Walter. Agnes held the letter to her chest, a soft warmth spreading through her. Walter's words were a lifeline, a gentle current connecting them across the vast distance. She imagined him writing it, perhaps by the flickering light of a lantern, his brow furrowed in thought. It was a simple letter, but it was filled with the echoes of their life together, of the love that transcended time and separation. She read it again, slowly, letting each word sink in. The mention of the daffodils, a small, personal detail, brought a faint smile to her lips. It was a sign that even in the midst of war, the quiet beauty of their world, their shared memories remained vibrant in his mind. Later, when Elsie returned from school, her cheeks rosy from the crisp air, Agnes shared the letter. Elsie listened intently, her eyes wide. He remembers the rhubarb, she exclaimed, a giggle bubbling up. Agnes hugged her daughter close, the soft warmth of Elsie's small body a comfort, a tangible reminder of the love that bound them. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of rose and lavender, Agnes played the old gramophone. It was a precious possession, carefully preserved, and its scratchy melodies filled the small cottage with a nostalgic comfort. A song Walter loved, a gentle tune about a meadowlark, filled the air. Agnes closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, carrying her back to quieter times, 2 evenings spent with Walter, his arm around her, their voices humming along to to the familiar notes. The music was a balm, a gentle reminder that even in fragmented times, beauty and peace could still be found. Winter descended upon Willow Creek with a gentle hand, blanketing the fields in a pristine white. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, and the cold seeped into the very bones of the cottage. Fuel was scarce, and Agnes bundled herself and Elsie in layers, their breath pluming in the chill air. Yet, even in the biting cold, a certain quiet beauty persisted. The frost-kissed trees glittered like spun glass, and the silence of the snow-laden landscape was profound, broken only by the occasional caw of a rook or the distant jingle of a cart on the lane. Rations grew tighter, and Agnes became a master of invention in the kitchen. She stretched every potato, every turnip, every precious ounce of flour. Stews simmered for hours, filling the cottage with their comforting aroma. And Elsie, despite the simpler fare, always declared her mother's cooking to be the best in the world. This small praise, delivered with a sticky kiss, was worth more than any feast. The hardest part of winter was the longer nights, the oppressive darkness that seemed to swallow the world outside. It was during these hours that Agnes's thoughts most often turned to Walter. She imagined him out there, somewhere in the biting cold, far from the warmth of their hearth. She would sometimes trace the lines of his photograph, his kind eyes looking out at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. One blustery evening, a fierce wind rattled the cottage windows. Curled by the fire, was tracing patterns on the frosty pane. "Mummy," she asked, her voice small, "will Papa be home for Christmas?" Agnes paused, her knitting needles still. The question hung in the air, a delicate, fragile thing. She turned to Elsie, offering a gentle smile. "I don't know, darling," she said softly, "but he'll be with us, in our hearts, always, and we'll send him all our love, wrapped up in our thoughts, won't we?" Elsie nodded, a serious expression on her small face. That night, as the wind howled outside, Agnes told Elsie a story, not from a book, but from her own heart. It was a story about a brave little robin who, even in the coldest winter, never lost hope that spring would come. She described the robin's tiny, resilient heart, its bright, hopeful song. Elsie listened, her eyes growing heavy, eventually drifting off to sleep with the image of the brave little bird in her mind. Agnes continued to knit, the rhythmic click of her needles, a soothing sound in the quiet room. She imagined the socks she was making, warm and thick, protecting Walter's feet from the cold. Each stitch was infused with her love, a silent prayer for his safety. She believed, truly believed, that her love, her hope, could reach him, a tangible warmth across the miles. Dreams became a solace during these long winter nights. Agnes would often dream of Walter, vivid and real. They would be walking hand in hand through a sun-dappled meadow, the air filled with the scent of wildflowers, his laughter echoing around them. She would wake with a bittersweet ache in her chest, but also with a sense of quiet comfort, as if he had truly been there, if only for a few fleeting moments. These dreams were gifts, precious glimpses of a future she held onto with fierce determination. The village community became a lifeline. Mrs. Henderson from next door, a formidable woman with a kind heart, would often bring over a small jar of homemade jam or a handful of eggs. Mr. Peterson, the old baker, would sometimes leave a slightly misshapen loaf of bread on their doorstep. These small acts of kindness, quiet gestures of solidarity, were like tiny flames in the pervasive darkness. They reminded Agnes that she was not alone, that they were all enduring, all hoping together. One particularly cold afternoon, the sky a heavy, oppressive gray, Agnes heard a faint scratching at her door. She opened it to find old Mr. Abernathy, the reclusive farmer from the edge of the village, standing there, his face etched with concern. In his gnarled hands, he held a small bundle wrapped in old sacking. "Agnes," he grunted, his voice gruff but kind, "found this little fellow shivering near my barn. Thought you might have a bit of milk for him." He carefully unwrapped the sacking to reveal a tiny, scrawny kitten, no bigger than Agnes's hand, its eyes wide and fearful. Agnes's heart melted. She gently took the kitten, its small body trembling. "Oh, you poor thing," she murmured. She brought it inside, warmed some milk, and watched as the kitten, tentatively at first, then greedily, lapped it up. Elsie, returning from school, was overjoyed. She named the kitten Mittens for its tiny white paws, and spent the rest of the evening cuddling it, her laughter filling the cottage. Mittens, small and vulnerable, became a symbol of resilience. He grew stronger each day, his purr a comforting rumble in the quiet house. His playful antics brought a much-needed lightness to their days, a small burst of joy in the midst of hardship. He curled up on Elsie's bed at night, a warm, purring presence, and often slept at Agnes's feet as she knitted by the fire. He was a gentle reminder that even in the darkest of times, new life, new comfort could emerge. As the days slowly lengthened and the last stubborn patches of snow retreated, a new vibrancy began to stir in Willow Creek. The first fragile snowdrops pushed their way through the thawing earth, followed by the cheerful yellow of daffodils, just as Walter had remembered. The air softened, carrying the faint scent of new growth, and the birds, emboldened by the returning warmth, began their joyful chorus. Spring always felt like a promise, a gentle assurance that after the long, cold slumber, life would burst forth anew. For Agnes, this spring felt particularly poignant. Up. Each new bud, each unfurling leaf was a tiny testament to endurance, a whisper of hope in a world still gripped by conflict. Elsie spent more time outdoors, chasing butterflies through the budding meadow, her laughter echoing freely. Agnes found herself humming as she worked in the garden, the soil yielding more readily to her touch. She planted seeds with renewed optimism, imagining the abundance they would bring in the summer months. Letters from Walter remained infrequent, but when they did arrive, they were read and reread until the paper was soft and worn. His words were a steady presence, a quiet reminder of his unwavering spirit. He wrote of the longing for home, of the beauty of a clear night sky, of the shared dreams amongst the men for a peaceful future. One afternoon, a telegram arrived. The sight of it, stark and official, always sent a shiver of dread through Agnes. Her hands trembled as she opened it, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't news of injury or loss, but a brief, formal message. Walter was being granted a short leave. He would be home in a week. Agnes stood in the small hallway, the telegram clutched in her hand, tears stinging her eyes. It was a wave of relief so profound it left her weak-kneed. She sank onto the wooden bench, letting the news wash over her. A warmth spreading through her chest that chased away the last vestiges of winter's chill. Elsie, skipping in from the garden, saw her mother. "Mummy, what is it?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. Agnes looked at her daughter, a joyous smile breaking across her face. "Papa's coming home, darling." "For a visit?" Elsie's eyes widened, then her face split into a radiant grin. She shrieked with delight, throwing her arms around Agnes's waist. They danced around the small hallway, a whirlwind of joy, their laughter bubbling up, light and free. The next week was a flurry of quiet preparations. Agnes polished the small cottage until it gleamed. She baked Walter's favorite apple pie, the scent of cinnamon and baked apples filling the air. Elsie helped her small hands carefully setting the table, her excitement a palpable presence in the cottage. On the appointed day, Agnes stood by the window, her heart a drumbeat in her chest. The lane was quiet, save for the chirping of sparrows. Then, in the distance, she saw him, a figure distinct from the others, walking with a familiar stride. Walter. He looked thinner, his uniform worn, but his eyes, when he met hers, were the same kind, steady eyes she remembered. He dropped his duffel bag, and for a moment, they simply stood there, looking at each other. The years of separation, the worry, the quiet endurance, all melting away in the warmth of their gaze. Then, Elsie, who had been hiding behind Agnes, darted out. "Papa!" she cried, launching herself into his arms. Walter knelt, his face breaking into a wide smile, and enveloped her in a fierce hug. He held her close, his eyes closed, breathing in the scent of her hair. Agnes stepped forward, and Walter rose, his arms opening. She walked into his embrace, feeling the familiar strength of his body, the comforting solidity of him. His arms wrapped around her, holding her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder, inhaling the scent of him. A mix of wood smoke, old fabric, and the faint, unmistakable smell of Walter. They spent the next few days in a quiet bubble of happiness. Walter was tired, his movements a little slower, but his presence filled the cottage with a warmth that had been missing for so long. He spent hours with Elsie, listening to her stories, teaching her how to whittle a small wooden bird. He helped Agnes in the garden, his strong hands familiar with a spade, and they talked quietly of everything and nothing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, they sat together by the creek, the willow rustling gently above them. Walter held Agnes's hand, his thumb tracing soft circles on her skin. Elsie was nearby, carefully arranging pebbles into a miniature village. "It's so peaceful here," Walter murmured, his voice low. "Sometimes, out there, I'd close my eyes and try to imagine this exact moment. The sound of the creek, the smell of the evening air, the feel of your hand in mine." Agnes squeezed his hand. "We thought of you, always, every day, every night." He turned to her, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "Your letters, Agnes, they were my anchor. Your hope, your resilience. It kept me going. And Elsie's drawings. She draws the most amazing rhubarb patches." Agnes smiled, a tear escaping the corner of her eye. "We tried to keep the light on for you, Walter, in our hearts, in our home." He nodded, pulling her closer. "You did. You kept it burning brightly. The quiet moments were the most precious. The shared silence over a cup of tea, the gentle brush of hands as they passed a dish, the soft rhythm of their breathing in the darkness of night. These were the threads that wove their lives back together, stronger and more resilient for having been stretched so thin. Too soon, the day of his departure arrived. The farewell was quiet, filled with unspoken promises. Walter held Agnes close, his gaze deep and tender. "I'll be back," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For good, this time. This war can't last forever." Elsie, bravely holding back her tears, hugged him fiercely. "Be safe, Papa," she murmured. Agnes watched him walk down the lane, a solitary figure against the morning light. Her heart ached, but it was an ache tempered by hope, by the memory of his touch, his quiet presence. He had brought a renewed sense of strength, a tangible reminder of the love that would always guide them home. Summer settled over Willow Creek, a lush, verdant blanket. The fields shimmered in the heat, and the air buzzed with the industrious hum of bees. Life, though still constrained by the realities of war, felt more vibrant, infused with the quiet resilience that had become second nature. Walter's visit had been a powerful tonic, a burst of warmth that sustained Agnes through the following months. His letters, though still sporadic, carried a new depth, a more profound sense of connection. He wrote of the beauty he found, even in the bleakest landscapes, of the shared humanity he witnessed amongst strangers, of the unwavering belief in a future free from conflict. Elsie, emboldened by her father's visit, seemed to grow taller, her spirit brighter. She spent hours by the creek, creating intricate worlds for her dolls out of moss and pebbles. She would often talk to Mittens, the kitten, now a sleek, playful cat, sharing her secrets and dreams. Agnes found solace in the repetitive rhythms of daily life. The harvesting of vegetables from her garden, the preservation of fruits, the careful mending of clothes. Each task was a meditative act, a quiet affirmation of endurance. She discovered a deeper strength within herself, a wellspring of quiet fortitude she hadn't known she possessed. The news from the wider world continued to be grim, but in Willow Creek, life carried on with its own gentle momentum. The distant rumble of planes was a constant reminder, a low thrum beneath the quiet hum of their lives. But it no longer held the same terror. They had learned to live with it, to find peace within the uncertainty. One scorching afternoon, as Agnes was hanging laundry, she heard the familiar sound of the village postman's bicycle. He dismounted, a broad smile on his face, and handed her a thick envelope. Her heart gave a hopeful leap. This wasn't a telegram. Inside, she found not a letter, but a small, beautifully carved wooden bird. It was a meadowlark, its wings outstretched as if in flight, its tiny eyes carved with exquisite detail. "My dearest Agnes, I carved this for you and Elsie, a little piece of home to remind you that even when the song is quiet, it is still there, waiting to be heard. The war is not over, but there is a feeling, a whisper on the wind, that things are changing. Hold on to hope. I will be home soon. For good, all my love, always." Walter, Alder, Agnes held the small wooden bird in her palm, its smooth, cool surface a comfort. She traced a delicate carving of its feathers, her eyes welling up. It was a tangible piece of Walter, a testament to his enduring artistry, his quiet strength, his unwavering love. It was a promise whispered across the miles. When Elsie saw the bird, her face lit up. "It's a meadowlark," she exclaimed, recognizing the bird from her mother's stories and the old gramophone song. She held it gently, her small fingers tracing its delicate form. That evening, as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the window, painting the cottage in hues of gold and rose, Agnes placed the meadowlark on the mantelpiece beside Walter's photograph. It seemed to sing a silent song of hope, of resilience, of the quiet strength that had carried them through the darkest hours. As the summer began to wane, a new sense of anticipation filled the air. There were whispers in the village, hushed conversations about peace, about the war finally drawing to a close. The news on the wireless seemed to carry a lighter tone, a more optimistic cadence. Agnes didn't allow herself to fully believe it, not yet. She had learned to guard her heart, to nurture hope gently, without letting it take flight too wildly. But a quiet joy began to bloom within her, a fragile but persistent flower. The last letter from Walter arrived in late August. It was short, written in haste, but every word resonated with profound meaning. "Agnes, Elsie, it's over. The war is over. I'm coming home. Soon, yours, always. Walter." Agnes read the words, then read them again, her eyes blurring. The paper trembled in her hand. The war was over. Walter was coming home. For good. The enormity of it, the simple, overwhelming truth, left her breathless. She found Elsie by the creek, humming softly as she tended her pebble village. "Elsie," Agnes said, her voice a little shaky, "Papa's coming home. The war is over." Elsie looked up, her blue eyes wide. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face, a slow, radiant blossoming of pure joy. She launched herself into Agnes's arms, and they held each other, swaying. Tears of relief and happiness streaming down their faces. The day Walter returned for good dawned clear and bright, a perfect autumn morning, almost exactly 4 years after he had first left. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Agnes, dressed in her best simple dress, stood by the window, a nervous flutter in her stomach. But it was a good kind of nervous, filled with profound anticipation. Elsie, wearing a dress Agnes had painstakingly mended and adorned with a small embroidered flower, was practically dancing with excitement. Mittens, sensing the unusual energy, purred loudly at her feet. They waited patiently by the cottage gate. The lane was quiet. The sun climbed higher, warming their faces. And then, in the distance, a familiar figure appeared, walking with a steady, unhurried pace, his silhouette growing clearer with each step. Walter. He looked different, older, perhaps, with lines etched around his eyes that hadn't been there before. His uniform was replaced by simple civilian clothes, and in his hand he carried a small, worn canvas bag. But his eyes, as they met Agnes's across the distance, were filled with the same deep love, the same quiet understanding. He reached the gate, and for a moment they simply stood there, gazing at each other. The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the three of them, bound by years of separation, by enduring love, by an unwavering hope that had finally, gloriously borne fruit. Then Elsie broke the silence. "Papa!" she cried, rushing forward. Walter dropped his bag, his arms opening wide, and he scooped her up, twirling her around, his laughter deep and resonant, filling the air, a sound Agnes had yearned to hear for so long. He set Elsie down, and she clung to his leg, looking up at him with adoration. Then his gaze shifted to Agnes. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "Agnes," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "my love." "Welcome home, Walter," she whispered, her voice choked. He pulled her into a warm, strong embrace, holding her close, her head resting against his chest. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, a comforting rhythm that spoke of safety, of belonging, of a journey finally concluded. They stood there for a long time, simply holding each other, letting the reality of their reunion wash over them, a deep, cleansing wave of peace. That evening, the cottage glowed with a warmth that went beyond the flickering lamplight. Walter sat by the fire, Elsie curled on his lap, listening intently as he described the places he had seen, the camaraderie he had shared. His stories weren't of battles, but of quiet moments of kindness, of shared meals under star-filled skies, of the resilience of the human spirit. Agnes watched them, a profound sense of contentment settling in her heart. The quiet beauty of this moment, the family reunited, safe and whole, felt like the most precious victory of all. The aroma of Agnes's cooking filled the air, a simple, nourishing meal, but to them it was a feast. Later, as Elsie slept soundly in her bed, Walter and Agnes sat by the dying embers of the fire, their hands clasped. The silence between them was not empty, but full, rich with shared history, with unspoken understanding. "It was hard," Walter said quietly, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "So many times I wondered if I would ever see this place again. See you both." "We knew you would," Agnes responded softly. "We kept the faith. We kept the light on for you." He turned to her, his eyes warm and tender. "And I felt it, Agnes, through all of it. Your love, your hope, it was like a guiding star." He rose, stretching slightly, and then knelt before the fireplace, carefully picking up the small wooden meadowlark from the mantelpiece. He handed it to Agnes. "Our little songbird," he said, "a reminder that even after the longest winters, spring always returns. And with it, new songs." Agnes held the bird, her fingers tracing its smooth surface. It felt like a small, tangible piece of their journey, a testament to the enduring power of love and hope. Walter put his arm around her, and they sat there together, watching the last embers glow and fade. The night outside was still, the gentle rustle of the willow by the creek, a soft lullaby. The war was a memory, a distant echo. The future, though still uncertain, was filled with the promise of simple, shared moments, of quiet joys, of a love that had weathered the storm and emerged, not unscathed, but infinitely stronger. Agnes closed her eyes, leaning into Walter's warmth. She listened to the gentle rhythm of his breathing, the soft purr of mittens curled by the hearth. The world outside could be chaotic, but here, in their small cottage, surrounded by the enduring symbols of their love and resilience, there was a profound and unwavering peace. And with that peaceful thought, she drifted into a deep, restful sleep.